So what we're going to do today, we're going to put this rosette inside this and cut out the sound hole. First thing we have to do, however, is we need to figure out where all that goes. So we flip this over, we're going to end up marking out where the front edge and the back edge of our body is. So I line it up on the center line, kind of push down so that it shapes itself to my radius dish. Let's put a little mark here. We're doing it on the inside, so we won't actually see this. This will all be hidden by the binding and so forth. I'll set this aside. And then the way I do things when I lay out my braces is I use this little template here. It also gives me the math that I'm going to go 13 3/8 from the tail. So let's check that out. And here's going to be my center line. Now let's take this over to the drill press. I thought I had stuff on record, but I did not. So basically what we did was we drilled a hole in our top. Then we've run it through. Basically got our jig here where we just kind of do our cutouts. We're going to set it on this ever so carefully. Make sure you flipped it around because we did cut from the back. We're going to throw a little tape on here. Make sure nothing is moving around on us while we do our cuts. Alright, so this little tool for cutting holes is not quite as nice. The base isn't quite as nice as the other one, but it does have some advantages. Basically, it's got a fine adjustment here, so I can really sneak up on a cut without having to, worry that my rosette needs to be exactly 4 3/30 or something like that. So what we're going to do is, I've already measured this. My rosette is about 4 3/4 middle to middle. So what I've got here is I've measured the pin to the drill bit is about 2 3/8. So that should cut pretty near the center of the rosette, or where the rosette's going to be. Then we will basically work our way out and work our way in until we've got a nice hole that fits the rosette and the binding I've chosen perfectly. Again, we're going to follow the same kind of rules that we did in the video where I cut these rosettes. We're going to turn things on and off from the switch. We're going to try and make sure that we do not wiggle our Dremel tool. This one actually is even worse than the other base, so you got to be super, super, super careful. All right, let's get rolling. Okay, now we want to check our depth. So I kind of usually shoot for maybe, I don't know, 6/1000ths of an inch? No, 60 thousandths of an inch. Zero it out. And our depth is about 30 thousandths. So we want to go a little bit more. We'll get to the right depth and then we'll start working our ways out. Yeah, we're about 50 thousandths. Maybe just a little bit more. And pretty darn close to 60 thousandths. We're going to leave it at that. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to leave our depth. We're going to set up here again. And we're going to start moving in until we get to the right size. We may end up having to like go and then back and then kind of work on fine-tuning it once we get there. And we're going to use this adjustment to pull the blade through. We're not going to touch the depth anymore. We do want to make sure it's nice and locked down. We don't want it wiggling on us. This one does tend to wiggle occasionally. And then this locks the distance to the pin. I'm going to make sure that we tighten that up every time after we adjust it so that we don't walk around there too. Basically, we're just going to keep repeating this until we get what we need to put this in. I'm going to keep going, but I'll speed this up a lot in post. All right, so we're actually right at the inner edge of the rosette itself. We haven't accounted for the binding yet, so that's kind of when I like to reverse and head back the other direction. So we end up with like something that is rosette sized first before we start trying to fit the binding, and that's where I kind of want to start sneaking up on the actual cut. And here we're going to now start loosening this bolt. So we cut the outside edge. So now here we've got a hole and it's rosette size, a little bigger actually. But now we're going to start sneaking up on the binding. So we'll crank just a little bit and then try and fit the binding on the inside. Well, let's do it on the outside here first. We're going to crank a little bit and then start trying to fit in binding. And where before I might have taken a couple passes before, checking where I was at, definitely want to do this every pass. So now you can see we are pretty close to single binding. And we need to trim that. But yeah, if we were just doing the single binding, we'd be perfect for the outside right now. So now we want to wiggle just a little bit farther so that we can get our maple. So we're basically doing maple on the outside, a little bit of ebony, then this koa. We're going to do sort of the ebony and then maple on the inside too. And this we're going to do just barely a crank and sneak up on where we need to be. Not quite yet. Almost. And we're pushing it to the other side, so, but we are so close, maybe a 1/28th, so like barely going to touch that adjustment screw this time. And this is exactly where we want to be. Super snug. Let's do a little trimming here. And maybe a little fine trimming. And let's take just a hair off this guy. Now the seam here doesn't have to be perfect because that's going to be covered by fretboard. We've got nice, snug, squishing everything together. This is exactly where I want to be. All right, now we're going to go do the same thing on the inside. We're going to just take enough away to do those inner binding things, bits. Oh man, too snug. Now we're going to do the same kind of thing, but we're going to do it with our inner binding. Let's see where we're at. Almost got enough for the first one, but not quite. So we still got a ways to go. Nah, we're not close. Got a little bit of play there. Got maybe a quarter of what we need. We got this together though. Let's do some rough trimming. We don't have to fight this as much later. Pretty good, actually. Binding is right where I want it to be. Now we just need to make some room for our maple. And we don't need much. Still, we're kind of pushing ourselves to one side, so it's not quite there yet. Getting close though. And I think we're about perfect. Make a quick rough cut here. And then we'll dry fit everything before it's time to glue. Just need to trim maple just a bit. All right. Make sure this all plays together nicely. Oh yeah, that's the stuff. Okay, now it's going to time for gluing it up. We're just going to use plain old-fashioned Titebond 1 and random stick to spread things around. Now, it is going to make things swell just a bit. You also want to make sure that everything's nice and clean. We don't have any kind of dust or debris in here that's going to make our trying to get everything in place challenging. And then we kind of want to know exactly how we're going to go. So I have a little bit of a notch on this ring, so we're going to push that to the side that is going to be covered by fretboard. And I think this is the way I want it to look. Do I want it that way? Light to the top and light to the bottom. I think I'm going to do it this way. Nice piece of figure there. And then we've got all our trimmings ready to go. What we're going to try and glue is glue down to the bottom, run some glue along the sides, run a little glue between the bindings so that they can all adhere to each other and to the top. It's not a lot of science here. Just get it well glued. Try and get up on the edges here. Now, this body is slightly oversized, so we are going to sand it down. So if we get a little glue up on the surface, it's not such a big deal, because we are probably going to take off maybe a few tens of thousands. This is probably sitting at about a 1/4 inch right now, and I like to get down to about 1/100th, maybe 110 thousandths of an inch for my tops. Here, take a little bit of glue. Yeah. Okay. Now I know it looks like a gummy mess at the moment, but it'll be all just fine once we run this through the drum sander. All right. Make sure we're all seated well here. And can take a rag, some water, kind of clean up most egregious extra glue spots. Warm water will work best, but the handy dandy squirt bottle that I keep in the shop will also take care of it. All right. Now what we want to do A little bit of weight on there. How are we looking? Yeah, I think we're looking good. And then we'll be back tomorrow. Or later today. Okay. Now we're all dry. We're ready to run it through the drum sander. Got a couple scraps here because we want to help avoid getting any snipe going through the drum sander. So we'll have a couple pieces that will sort of feed in and out before the top itself. And then we'll get the rosette down to the level of the top, and then just take a little bit more off to get our final dimension. All right, now we're done here. Let's see what thickness we ended up at. 108 thousandths, about perfect. Nice, smooth rosette. We did end up with a little bit of scorching over here. The belt got some gunk on it and tore it up a little bit. Most of this is going to be outside the binding, so we're probably not in too bad a shape here, but we can sand it. Looks like it's a little bit depressed, so a little bit of steam might bring that out too. But in general, I think we're good to go. Okay, so twice now in this video I thought I was recording and was not. New camera, still getting used to it. Got to figure out when it goes to sleep and when I'm only waking things up instead of actually recording. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pretend that we're going to cut a sound hole in this top. And we'll go through that without actually doing it because I'm not ready to sink the rosette into here yet. So in general, what would have happened is we would have had our rosette, we would have sanded nice and smooth, and then we want to come in, you know, a 1/16 or maybe 3/32, maybe even a 1/8 of an inch off the edge of the rosette, and that's where we're going to do our cut. So on this one, we're going to pretend that we've got a rosette here and we need to come in, you know, that puts us at maybe 1 7/8 off the pin. So we'll take our handy dandy tool, fumble around with the pin for a little bit, and get seated down there. And we're gonna adjust our distance from the pin so that we can see that the bit is just inside the line, clamp it down. And then of course what we always want to start from the side that is going to be covered up by fretboard in case we get any munging or wiggle when we first dive in. And then at this point we would adjust the depth, go in about halfway, and then cut our radius very carefully without wiggling. So once we've done that, we would have a hole about halfway deep, and then we'll need to flip it over. We don't want to push our hole through the back. We want a nice clean cut on both sides. That's why we're going to do it just halfway through from each side. Now at this point in time, we may get disconnected from the pin, or we will get disconnected from the pin as we complete our cut. But we don't want this piece to move. as we finish the cut. So we need to tape it so it doesn't wiggle as that cut completes. Now at this point in time, our bit is still about halfway down, so we'll roll it back up because we don't want to try and plunge down by just dropping it on the pin. So again, then we'll start up again. We'll plunge just a little bit, just enough to finish making that cut. So it'll be about halfway. Do our circle, and then turn everything off, and we're done. So when we're done, we should end up with a puck like this and our cut like that. This guy came out pretty much exactly as I was hoping, and that's going to be the top to our walnut guitar.